Hey, everyone. Welcome to Now We're Talking with Doug Pagitt. Great to have you. Hey, a couple of things. If you haven't already subscribed to the Vote Common Good podcast, you really need to. I'm putting out a bunch of content over there with all the Vote Common Good crowd. There's more stuff than you could ever imagine, and the best work we've ever done. It's there on the podcast, so please find your way over. Here's just a little snippet of a piece that will be over there, as well as something that I did with the Red Letter Christians, which is a group that I'm a part of, and had a conversation with Shane Claiborne for the Wednesday night mobilizing with Red Letter Christians. And we talked about life and faith and politics and how we're engaging in the world and all kinds of good things. So I would love it if you would, like this podcast and do all those things you do when you like podcasts. I hear all the other podcast people say that kind of stuff, and I've never asked you all to, go on to the spaces and places where you get your podcast and tell people you like this one. But, I guess that's what you do now. You ask people to go like your podcast. So go like this podcast and then go over to votecommongood.com or wherever you get your podcasts and look for the Vote Common Good one. We have our Tuesday night electionaries that are on there. We have random conversations. We have a regular weekly segment about the President of the United States called This Guy Has Got to Go. And it's super fun. All right, so here's this terrific little conversation with my dear friend Shane Claiborne and some of the other good folks over at Red Letter Christian. So enjoy.
Folks, we're just kind of getting rolling here. Katie's telling me she's watching us, so we're on.
Game on. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome once again to Midweek Mobilizing. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're so glad you could join us this evening. We're so thrilled that tonight we have Doug Pagitt, the Doug Pagitt with us. Joining us to talk all about Vote Common Good and just how people are putting their faith into action within our political spheres. And, Midweek Mobilizing is all about, Red Letter Christians coming together as they lead and they learn and they love through this time of crisis. And so who better to have us through that than, of course, our co-founder, Shane Claiborne, and our special guests each week. And so wonderful to have Doug here. Want to note that, we have a big tent here at Red Letter Christians where all are welcome. Doug runs, a partisan organization trying to get people to vote their conscience. We welcome everyone, but also want to note that we are a 501c3. We are nonpartisan, but we want to be in dialogue with people. And so this is why Doug is good friends with us and going to tell us all about his good work. And so, folks, if you have questions and want to continue to engage with us, we invite you to just send us a note through the Midweek Mobilizing hashtag. That is, something you can put on Facebook. We'll send in your comments, your questions, and we'll collect all of them, and we'll make sure that Shane and Doug answer it live. The same thing goes for folks who may be joining in through Zoom live at this moment. Just put your question in the Q&A box, and what we're looking forward to just a great conversation of dialogue together. And be sure you hang on through the whole hour. We actually have a special guest at the very end and some really great announcements. So you definitely don't want to miss that. So I will be back towards the end there, but really, Shane, Doug, take it away for us.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation tonight, partly because we've been through a lot together. Doug and I have been friends for a couple of decades, and it is unbelievable. And we've even been co-defendants a time or two. I've got a little picture to share with you all by way of intro to Doug here. Just you wait, people. Just you wait. So this, just the backdrop for this was we were a part of an action with a few hundred people, right? That were asking for some common sense changes on guns, particularly on assault weapons. And it was one of the first times that we had done a direct action that risked arrest. And so we had done a live demonstration transforming a assault rifle from Philadelphia into a garden tool. We delivered it to Senator Pat Toomey's office, asking him to support a ban on assault rifles. And then this happened. So we were taken into custody. And given the choice of whether or not we would walk, Doug decided not to walk because he was doing nothing wrong. And the police carried him. And this picture I like because it's kind of got that. It's like you're lounging in the hat and just the, whatnot. So yeah. And then one of the police officers said, "Look, we're just doing our job here." And Doug said, "And so am I." So that was
well, a little note on that. If you can't tell from the picture, I'm a taller person than average, 6'7", and and I'm full sized, and so these guys have to pick me up and and carry me, and they're just like, "Are you kidding me?" The guy's like, "Come on, man, I'm just doing my job. Just get up and walk." I said, "Well, so am I. Like, we're protesting here for a reason, and we all got a thing to do. We're all doing our part."
And the great thing was some of those police officers told us very explicitly that they were with us. These guns kill police officers too. And so all our charges were dropped, and it really just encouraged us, I think, the whole thing. But I also noted your hat. So just for you, Pag, I got my grandfather's hat here. I'm not sure I can do the whole interview like this because all I'm looking at right now is my hat. But,
hey, I was at a hat shop once when I was first wanting to be a guy that wore a hat. And I said to the man in the hat shop, I said, "Hey, I'm looking for the perfect hat because I want to be a guy who wears a hat." And he said, looks at me straight away and goes, "Look, it's what's in a man's head, not what's on a man's head that makes him a hat guy." He said, "You're never going to find the perfect hat until you decide you're going to be comfortable wearing a hat."
Wow.
Great line. It's what's in a man's head, not what's on a man's head that makes him a hat guy. I mean, that preaches across a lot of our scenarios, doesn't it?
Pretty sure that's on our Twitter feed right now. And so, yeah, proud of that.
Jesus said something like that. It's not the outside, it's what's on the inside, right?
Yeah. So we're going to get to all the common good stuff, the vote common good stuff. But tell us, introduce yourself a little bit. Tell people a little bit about you, what you've been up to.
Yeah, I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm in my basement where I spend a lot of time talking on the internet to people around the world. So I feel like I have lost my bearings and become, an unmoored person talking to the internet in my basement about politics and the way of the world. I've been a pastor for all my adult life. I got into Christianity as a teenager growing up in a family that didn't have any religion at all. And the evangelicals of my little world outside of Minneapolis welcomed me into the faith and said, "Hey, the Christian faith is a first name basis faith. So you matter in this faith and you should engage in it and you should lead and take it and go." And it was just really great. So I immediately got into lots of things in Christianity. In fact, actually, I don't even know if you know this, but 1983, I was a junior in high school, became a Christian in April. And it was really life transforming for me. So the next year I wanted to be public about my faith, which is something I've continually been trying to do, whether it's in a protest like that or vote common good or being a pastor, which I have for 30 years. But I wanted to be public in my faith in addition to being private in my faith. So I started handing out material at my school about Christianity. And I thought, well, if I didn't know anything about Christianity, maybe other people don't either. Well, it turns out that's not true. Most people did know about it and were uninterested, which still remains true. But then we got suspended from high school, me and a friend named Tani, and suspended from high school for handing out religious material. And we sued our school district for violating our constitutional rights of freedom of speech and freedom of religion.
No idea.
And
wow.
That case we won this federal court case, and that became this preamble for the Student Rights Act of 1984 that Ronald Reagan then signed the next year. And so I was Christian for, months by the time I was involved in activism and public displays of pushing against a power system that was being used to quiet people who were trying to say something that their faith was calling them to say. And so there's never really been a moment in my Christian experience. Now I'm 53, so that was, whatever 1983 is from now, a long time ago, 37 years. It's been that consistent narrative all along that the Christian faith is not only supposed to be good for you, it's supposed to be a benefit and blessing to all the world. And one is called to be public about it. So that's kind of what I've done and tried to do, and try to find a way to be part of that, and also to be kind of pastoral, especially to people who are outside the faith, because there's a lot of internal fights, in Christianity, and I've done my share of that work and been involved in all that, but man, it's it's supposed to be good news, and as my friend Samir likes to say, for a lot of people, the good news, it doesn't sound like news, and it doesn't sound particularly good. Like, why don't we make it newsworthy and make it good for somebody, and maybe good for all of us? Maybe what you might even call common good. So,
come on, yeah. I don't know if I've ever told you to, but it reminded me of the "See You at the Pole" rallies, which I organized. I didn't have nearly the impact that you did. We just went to Hardee's and got biscuits and gravy and got up at 5 a.m. and prayed the flagpole, but we felt like we were doing it, man. And
I was
ready to go to jail.
I helped initiate all that stuff way back in the day. And we're doing that with Vote Common Good. We have a high school and college age thing called See You at the Poll, which is to meet at your flagpole every Tuesday from when school starts until election day. And then we are going to use that to say, see you at the polls.
Come on.
Yeah, we're borrowing, literally stealing the see you at the poll, man. And telling high school kids to stand up for faith and for civic engagement, because you can't call for a public good and ignore the civic space. So we want those flagpoles not to just be a place where Christians show their internal life, but where they call forth for something to bring about some kind of a change in the world. So between, whenever school starts, August or September, if it does start in this COVID season, through Tuesday, November, and it's even on a Tuesday, which I don't know when you guys did your see at the poll, but for us, it was a Tuesday.
It may have been a Tuesday. Yeah. And we were not, and I still I remember that and get the chills, like you really, and we really were praying for our country. And I think, one of the things that you and I have in common too, is that we really believe in prayer. We believe, that this current crisis in America is not just a political crisis, but it's a spiritual crisis. So, as we talk, those of you that are listening in, you're going to hear a lot of grace in Doug's voice, because you're really a pastor and at heart. So talk a little bit about, you started Solomon's Porch, but now you're kind of pastoring a movement, really. So talk a little bit more about the pastor.
Sure. Yeah. Look, I'd be glad to. Jesus has this great sense of the left out, the left behind, the let down are always included. And there's this kind of empathy for, you hear it in the Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Like in the midst of the seminal moment of Jesus being executed as a political and religious outsider and criminal, so that the power can be given back to the empire. In the middle of that, Jesus, like, people don't know what they're doing. You can hear Jesus in his acts of forgiveness and his acts of proclamation, saying to people, at some point you're going to awaken and you're going to see, and when you do, you think of the parables, of the workers that work in the field all day, and the worker that only works for an hour, and everyone's treated the same. And there's this sensibility that I feel like as people of public Christian faith, we're really called to that. So, and then I've started communities in Minneapolis. I started a community 20 years ago called Solomon's Porch, which is a church that's wanted, and I left that role a few months ago. And in fact, a woman named Nikki Franz has taken over that. It just was announced last Friday. So super great news. Awesome. That she's coming in. And, I don't think Christianity is meant to be lived alone. Like, life is not meant to be lived alone. It's meant to be lived in community, and it's meant to be lived with an abundance of care and kindness and consideration for one another. And that's just super hard, especially when you get into the activist world and you get into justice work. It can feel sometimes like you're called to fix the problem and not be someone who's going to put up with things the way they are. And a lot of us have a very underdeveloped sense of what kindness and compassion and consideration means. And so sometimes we can feel, I shouldn't speak for others. Sometimes I can feel this battle inside about, well, am I going to be about justice, or am I going to be about inclusion? Or am I going to be about justice, or am I going to be about compassion? And I think that they have to go together, and they're the pieces that call each other. So being an activist and having a pastor's heart, I think, is the way it should go, because look, all of us, I mean, most of us are doing the best we can, and it's not all that good sometimes, right? So you really need people to say, you know, I have this friend who told me this little parable. He said, about this older guy who lived his life the best he could. And he says he dies and stands before God and says, oh God, I'm so glad I'm here. I did the best I could. And the Lord says, no, you didn't, but you did good, and welcome home.
Oh,
right?
that's a good one.
I did the best I could. No, you didn't, but you did good, and welcome home. Like this idea, no one does the best they can all the time, but we want to, and we try to, and we would like it if we did, and we want to tell ourselves that we did. And then when we don't, well, then what? And so this sense of like calling for the world, for your kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven, and then look around and be like, well, who's making it not like heaven? All of us. We are doing this to each other. We are the ones doing this. And then what do? Then you're either faced with, enemies that are trying to destroy you, or neighbors that you're trying to live with. And fortunately, Jesus says, love them both the same. Neighbor, enemy, self, God. Make that all one love. And man, that's so anyway, I mean, I've been trying to do that, for the course of my life and public.
Yeah. And our community started around the same time, the Simple Way here in Philly, where I'm sitting across the street from our original community center, and live across the street from it in Solomon's Porch there. And then, we got involved with this Red Letter Christian stuff. You've been a part of it really from the beginning. And because we realize that there's something really wrong, there's different versions of Christianity, and some of them don't smell a lot like Jesus. But we've been navigating the political thing almost for me peripherally, as a part of this, but there's a big picture. We went through the emerging church movement, all that. You were huge, instrumental in all that. And I can remember our conversations when I had my very strong Christian anarchist tendencies, which my wife still has over here, by the way. And we had a lot of talking about like, what difference does it make to vote? How important is it and stuff? And so now I mean, this is a big part of your life right now, but I'm interested in how you've kind of evolved in some of that, and, why voting is important. What might you say to someone that's still kind of skeptical? Asking for a friend, of course. That's for my wife, actually. I'm asking for.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm not always sure. I should say it this way. I have not always been sure that voting's been the most important thing in the world. I'm not sure it always is. I'm not even sure that because of the way our system works of political parties and electoral college at the presidential level, or districts and so on, for our state and congressional candidates. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to people. They don't really know. It feels like it's, 90% of people who are incumbents are reelected. So it just kind of makes you feel like, I don't know that it always matters. So I carry some of those same wonderings about how do you create an alternative world that you call people to live into, which I think is what the kingdom of God calls you to. It's an imagination for the utopian possibility of what could be. And at the same time, how do you live in the world that you're in and contribute to it? And how do you walk on with both those feet, right? The world that should be and the world that we're in. And I think that if one's the left foot and one's the right foot, we should not hop. We should run to that world. And right now, though, the reason I started Vote Common Good with a group of other people in 2018 is because voting is a way that we can actually respond to what I see to be a very clear and very present crisis and threat to the well-being and to the health and well-being of people on this planet and for the planet itself. So voting right now, in this moment, in this election on November 3rd, to do what we can to stop the reelection of Donald Trump and Trumpism and the Trump administration, I think it has transcended simple politics and has moved into a spiritual, emotional, physical, and civic crisis.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I would have I'm totally sure that had Donald Trump not been elected and hadn't been elected with the support of religious people, especially Christians from my tradition, like white evangelicals, I probably wouldn't be out saying voting is the most important thing you can do, because I wouldn't have awakened to that issue. But I'll tell you right now, I think it is crucially important And I'm glad that that caused me to wake up to the fact that it's always been very important, right? It's always mattered, but it matters with a kind of intensity right now that has drawn people like me. And I'm very grateful to be pulled into a world to recognize. And I've run for office. I tried to run for the state legislature here in Minnesota. Like, I've been super politically and nerd out and all that. I think voting, as crucial as it is, it's the bare minimum of civic engagement. It's not the highest level of civic engagement. The highest level of civic engagement is to love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? It's to care for your neighbor personally and not just through a political system. But voting is a great way to start. And I think it's a must have, especially in this election. And look, there's a lot of people who just don't know how they should vote, and people don't like to be wrong. They don't like to be uninformed, and they don't like to get duped. And you jump into voting, and people feel that way all the time. They're like, I'm going to vote for the wrong person. I don't understand all this stuff. And what if I make a mistake? So we're trying to say to people, make it common good your voting criteria.
You've heard me say, I think a good posture for a Christian in especially a federal election is that we don't go in looking for a savior, but we go in to try to do some damage control, to vote for the person that's going to do the least amount of damage in the world, to harness the principalities and powers just a little bit. And that's, I think that's some people say it's a little cynical, but the Rob, who's been a colleague on the Vote Common Good, one of the things he said, I had to get it because I didn't want to get his stat wrong. Congress has a single-digit approval rating. The Congress members in general, a single-digit approval rating, but over 90% reelection rate. So you're like, whose fault's that? Well, yeah, but that's a pretty stunning stat. And as you've been traveling, well, you should talk a little bit more about what this Vote Common Good campaign has been about. And by the way, for folks listening in, I genuinely say that Red Letter Christians is nonpartisan. We are focused on Jesus, but that does mean that we care about issues that matter. And it means that we're very concerned about this current administration and the policies that we see. So tell us about Vote Common Good, though, because we have been partnering on some stuff and supporting. I personally have been, a part of Vote Common Good.
Yeah. You've been at a number of events and a big part of it. So thank you for that. I really, really appreciate it. Look, I like to say Vote Common Good is also nonpartisan. We're also non-Trump. Like, go ahead and be a Republican. Vote for any Republican you want. You just don't have to vote for every single one of them. Like, I think Donald Trump is a unique crisis and a unique problem, and anything we can do to stop this unique crisis. I would love it if there were Republican alternatives. Like we say to Republicans all the time, we're not asking you not to be a Republican, just asking you as a Republican to not vote for this guy. And so we're not trying to pick one party over the other. We are trying to respond to the removal of this person in this position because he's wholly incompetent and I think is a danger. Now, is that partisan? Yeah, I guess so, because you don't want him to be the candidate any longer. But if we can turn him into a one-term president, I think that would be a great gift that we could give. So what we've been doing, the heartbeat of our work has been traveling the country. So on two different occasions, once in 2018 and then beginning of 2020, travel in a bus, travel around the country and hold events. We do face-to-face events. And we in 2020, we were 38 states in on March 13th when we decided to put our tour on hold. And then a few days later, many of the states called stay-at-home orders. So now we're back at home. But we do a number of programs. What we're trying to do is ask voters to make, as written behind me, faith, hope, and love their call for a change on Election Day. And look, if you can read the Sermon on the Mount on Monday and vote for Donald Trump on Tuesday, God bless you. Go ahead and do that. But if you can't, don't feel bullied into doing it because someone's telling you that they're trying to be nonpartisan. Like, you don't have to do it. There's no call in your Christian faith that should make you have to vote for a Republican, especially not for this guy. But I'll tell you, saying something like that, we've said that in places in 2018 and 2020 all over the country in nearly every state. And there's people who look at you like, I've never heard anyone say that. I know it sounds amazing that people have not heard that, but there are people who really do believe that if you're Christian or you believe Jesus or you follow the call of the Bible or the red letters, that means you have to be a Republican. And so sometimes just saying to people, you don't have to be, is the call. So what we're trying to ask people to do is to have a higher calling, the common good, what I think is what Jesus referred to as the kingdom of God. I sort of use those interchangeably. The commonwealth of God, some people like to refer to that phrase instead of the kingdom, because we don't live in a world of kingdoms anymar. But we also don't live in England where there's a commonwealth, or in Massachusetts.
Pennsylvania.
So Pennsylvania.
Because we had Quakers, William Penn. Yeah.
Yes, they were, and man, the Quakers, my favorites. I just because their original name, the Society of Friends. I mean, honestly, how did you give up that branding for Quakers? I mean, look, I'm all for a good shake and bake, but the Society of Friends, I mean, so great, right? Man, if
the Quake comes from the charismatic side of it, right? To where you would shake with the spirit and you would speak into the silence. You
were meant to sit quiet until something in you started to move and started to quake, and then they would shake. In fact, the Quaker, I'm not even making this up. I think it's true. The Quakers and the Shakers are similar, but saw each other as real different groups. Like, we're Quakers, you're Shakers.
Wow.
So it's
Anabaptist history with Doug Pagitt.
The Anabaptist history, right? And when you don't grow up, maybe if you don't grow up in religion, all these pieces are just fascinating. Like, if you're an adopted kid into the Christian family, you're like, I don't know, this whole family is kind of fantastic, right? The Episcopalians and the Presbyterians and the Quakers and the Shakers and the Pentecostals and the Methodists and the Baptists, and like, they're all kind of interesting, right? And in all of those groups, they all had a civic moment. This is what's fascinating about a little bit of church history is almost every one of those religious movements were born out of a collective cry, what we would call a civic crisis. So the idea that they were born out of that, and even Jesus's crucifixion and burial and resurrection, you taught me this, is a political act, right? When a guy who suffers the death penalty in order to be silenced is then proclaimed to have come back from the dead, that's kind of an anti-authoritarian response, right? I mean, that was one of the great things I ever heard from Shane Claiborne. Is there's nothing more sort of anti or protest moment like the resurrection. So all of these are born out of these civic crises, and it's something's happening in our society where we're asking ourselves to dislodge our civic engagement. Now, here's what I think is worthy of being careful of, and I think you've been best at this, and Red Letter Christians is a leader for me on this, is civic engagement is not only or always best seen through the political system. Politics is one part of the civic life together, and electoral politics is only one part of our political life, and the presidency is only one position inside of the electoral politics. So it's sort of like these resting Russian dolls. And every time I think of Trump, I think of Russia. So
yeah,
these dolls that down inside there, you just have this little piece that for a lot of us can seem like it's the entire thing. But if electoral politics for the president gets someone to care about civic engagement, and that's ultimately going to cause their mind to open wider and their lens finder to be a more wide angle view so they can see the rest of the world, great. If politics causes you to become more myopic and to cause your blinders to come in, it's not serving you well. So I hope that the political engagement, electoral politics engagement, will cause people's lens to pull open wider. And I've been talking to lots of people who voted for Trump, and that's what's happening to them. That's what's causing them to not support that.
We're going to talk about that in just a second. And folks that are watching on the Facebook Live and everything, you can put in your questions, and we're going to try to get to a few of them. We're going to keep going because we're having fun here. But so we used to joke, you and I used to joke that they have these bumper stickers that say, God was not a Republican, and then in much smaller letters it said, or a Democrat. Yeah. And so I'm in one of those states that's really divided. People say, what's between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, Alabama? Like, we've kind of got like a lot of the culture wars are fleshed out in our state. And what would you say, like, because folks, to be fair, is there something that you feel like is worth critiquing on the left or in the Democratic world? And is there something worth affirming, or a place that traditional conservatism is got some good things to offer the equilibrium these days?
Yeah, I sure hope so. When I ran for the state legislature, I ran as a Democrat, but with what I called
And Rob that I mentioned that's been on Vote Common Good, he ran as a Republican.
he ran as a Republican. Yeah, I mean, we're full of Republicans, Democrats, Green Party members, Libertarians. Well, no, but when I ran as what I call a person with an indie Democratic spirit, an independent Democrat Republican spirit. Because look, those parties and those positions exist for a reason, because they're making a point, and they're not all right all the time. No one perspective could be right all the time, right? This is part of my postmodern thinking of the world. That's just not even reasonable to consider, that one is right all the time and one is wrong all the time. So we have to always be willing to create something out of difference. And this is where, as a progressive, I like to say you want to lean into difference, because it allows you to see that thing that you couldn't see on your own. And becoming disillusioned is really good, because it allows you to set aside your illusions, and you start to recognize the world is being seen by different people, and they have a contribution to make. For sure, I think that's 100% true. And I voted for Democrats. I voted for Republicans. I'm not trying to say I'm, Mr. in the middle. It just depends. It depends on me in the moment. It depends on what it means to be Democrat and what it means to be Republican. And things weren't always the way they were right now. Like I was a youth pastor back in the early 90s, right? And I remember when there was this big push, this big conservative Christian women's push to put rating labels on music. Do you remember that whole thing when they were going to put? Yeah. That was led by Tipper Gore. Al Gore's wife was the conservative Christian woman leading that whole movement, right? A few years before that, Jimmy Carter is the president, an evangelical Democrat from Georgia. Yeah. And so these things move around all the time, right? And political parties and what they mean and what they hold to, that's as dynamic as the rest of our lives. So what does it mean to be one or the other? It's complicated, but we always live in a moment. So my hope is that we'll all look at the moment we're in, not the legacy and not just the desire of what we want in the future, but the moment we're living in, and to make our decisions in real time. That's what I think Jesus is calling, the why I'm into the Jesus spirituality path still, is that Jesus calls for people to be living in spirit right now and to follow as the Spirit moves and blows. And that's the thing I hope that we'll lean into. Can I tell you one little story?
Yeah.
Last April, on April 15th, Donald Trump came to Minnesota. He was touting his tax bill, which I thought was a disaster. But he was touting his tax bill. It was also the time where he'd started saying things about Ilhan Omar. And Ilhan Omar is the congresswoman. She's from my district, so she's my congresswoman. And he was saying things about her that were really meant to be racist and mean and gross and terrible. So that was all an uproar. So he comes to Minnesota, where she is a congresswoman, to have a rally about his tax bill. So there, he's going to go into a factory to give this little speech down outside of Minneapolis, 15 or 20 minutes, on this factory by a little road. A protest, people supporting the president show up, and they're on one side of the road. And then people supporting Ilhan Omar are on the other side, this little 2-lane road. And they're lined up, and there's hundreds of people on each side. And at the time, I was running my radio show for a radio station here. And so I was interviewing people, walking back and forth across the street, interviewing people on both sides. And here's what I would hear from people on both sides. I would say, hey, so what brings you here? And what are you learning? And people on both sides would point across the street and say, I got to tell you, I have no idea who those people are. Who are they? Yeah. Right. The Ilhan Omar supporters are looking at these Trump supporters like, who are those people? And the Trump supporters are saying, what is going on across the street? These people are 45 feet apart. They live in they live within driving distance in Minnesota, of all places. Like, how much difference is there in this group, right? So much shared, and an unable to even know who they are. Yeah. Like, really powerful. Hey, the other thing I saw when I was on the Trump supporter side, probably every 20 or more, every person said some version of this. I'm not a bad person for voting for Donald Trump. And I would say to them, well, who says you're a bad person? And they'd go, well, those people across the street, the media, my brother-in-law, you. They'd point at me like, I see you moving back and forth. I know what you think of us. That was really poignant for me, to see these people who are feeling like they're hated, they're beguiled, they're judged. And I was kind of like, yeah, you kind of got me on that one, because I really was feeling that way about them. Like, who are you and what are you doing voting for Trump, right? Like, that's no good to just be sort of looking down on these people or saying you are like subhuman to a point I can't even recognize what would motivate you.
Yeah.
That was really, really, a learning moment for me.
Well, I think for me, like having been on the other side of a lot of these issues for a good chunk of my life, like I was for the death penalty. I grew up with guns. I helped organize Republican campaigns when I was in high school. Those things, like it gives you a little bit more grace to see that we're all a work in progress, and that there's things that we experience that change the way that we think on stuff. And it seems really clear, like in Jesus, that what he does consistently call out is self-righteousness, right? Yeah. He calls it the yeast of the Pharisees, but he tells stories like the religious guy that stands up and points at the people and says, "Thank you that I'm not like them and not like that tax collector back there." And then the tax collector just lowers his head and beats his chest and says, "God, have mercy on me." Yeah. And that's kind of the posture that's, celebrated in that story. Right. And that self-righteousness is really toxic, and it's nonpartisan, right? I get emails, you probably do too, from folks that you're not progressive enough. Why do and they're really, really angry. And then you get these others, why don't you talk about abortion more? Why don't you, and they're hitting, and it's but there's this kind of anger and self-righteousness that can take a lot of different shapes. And you've really, I feel like, been a real consistent voice in challenging that. Anytime we're demeaning other people, or no matter how good your ideas are, if you're mean, like that's no good, So I want you to tell people about some of the former Trump supporters that you've interviewed, and then, cue up this video. We're going to see just like a 1-minute trailer to a much larger series Doug's been doing, but you launched it today. So it's just, we did.
Great. So thanks. I mean, it was
super creative. Doug Pagitt name, of course.
Yeah.
Hindsight 2020.
Hindsight 2020. That's I'm on the verge of pridefulness about the name of that one. So Hindsight 2020 is stories of people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and won't vote for him in 2020. So hindsight is 2020, and we hope Hindsight 2020 brings people to a new realization. But they're interviews. We put a word out and asked people on social media, did you vote for Donald Trump in 2016? Are you not planning to vote for him in 2020? And are you willing to tell your story? And so people offered it up. And we told them it was going to be recorded. So we set up a Zoom call. We've done all this in just the last couple of weeks. Set up Zoom calls from my basement and them wherever they are. And we would talk, and then we edited it together into these videos. And we've done lots of them, and we have a little subset that are part of these videos. And so we'll show you a 1-minute one here in a moment. There's also a 4-minute version, which we're moving around, which are some of these same people, plus a few others, women, men, from lots of states, all from different states. And here's the 4 things that we pulled out of all these conversations. And I was surprised at the level of consistency among people I spoke with, that all had similar experiences that led them to this. And I'll go through them really quickly. One was, they all say something about, I was really convicted. I was really conflicted in 2016. I didn't know how I could vote for Hillary Clinton, and I felt like I was stuck voting for Donald Trump. So I was conflicted. Then I wanted to give him a chance. I thought he would rise up. I thought he would show himself to be worthy of the job. I thought the job would force him into being something that he would grow into the job. Then I reached a breaking point. Something happened. For many of them, it was kids in cages and other issues. And once I reached the breaking point, I realized I couldn't support him anymore. And then the 4th, which is the most surprising to me, they all said some version of, and since then, I have deepened into my faith. And that's what is causing me to not support Donald Trump as I move forward. I thought a lot of these people were going to say, look, I was raised Christian. I was into the Christian thing. My Christian and Republican worlds had melded together in such a way I couldn't separate them. So in order to give up supporting Donald Trump, I had to give up my faith, and I was willing to do it. But instead, they said just the opposite. I have deepened into my Christian faith, and that is what has allowed me to separate these two. So it was amazing to watch this. And that's what I hoped. I hope people would deepen into faith, hope, and love, and that their faith would call them, their hope would call them, that love would call them forward, and they would recognize and see something. So it's been kind of amazing. We're asking people to share these stories. So if you know someone, go to voteCommonGood.com. You'll see the Hindsight 2020 link. You can watch these videos in the 1 minute, 4 minute, and full 20-minute versions of all these interviews if you want to. You can also list your own story there, and we'll reach out to you. And if you want to record a video or write it up or do some other way, we'd love to tell all these stories, because we believe there are thousands of people who want to tell their story so that others feel the confidence that when someone else goes first, they can as well. So it's pretty great.
Awesome. Check out the 1 minute video we're going to play for y'all right now, and then we'll be back to unpack it.
I voted for Trump in 2016. I didn't want to do it, but I also had problems with some things with Hillary. And so I really felt like I was in a dilemma. Who do I choose?
And I also thought that he would raise himself into the level of the office, that he'd kind of put down the childish ways.
He's not draining the swamp. He opened the gates for the swamp monsters to come in.
Having lived overseas, I cannot vote for somebody who's very xenophobic.
The more work I do around anti-racism, the more I deeply regret and am saddened by the choice I made 4 years ago.
What's happening at the border with the concentration camps, pro-life doesn't really mean what pro-life should mean.
Donald Trump is not a representation of anything Jesus related.
I actually got on my knees and I repented to God for my vote for Donald Trump.
So it's just a little snippet. It's just regular old people like that sitting at home and telling their stories about this change that's happened. And man, they all felt so lonely. It's been so interesting to talk with them. They just like, in my little town, and a lot of these people are from small towns. In my little town, I'm one of the only people. And I know that's not true, right? But there's a lot of places you just can't say it. You can't talk about it. Especially if you're religious. Like, two things people don't want to talk about is religion and politics.
Right.
I find that out. That's why I don't get invited to parties anymore. People say it's COVID, but I really know it's because they don't want to talk about religion or politics. I haven't been invited to a party in months.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Katie.
You got it back.
I heard that laugh.
Yeah, you got it. So I'm going to ask you one more thing about this, then we're going to talk about the sweet Lord Jesus some. So, and then hang in there, everybody. We got a really great surprise guest coming here in a minute. Our friend, it's a friend of ours, also a co-defendant, just to give you a hint.
That's right.
But anyway, you got a bunch of other stuff going on with Vote Common. We've been doing these electionary nights. So every Tuesday night, tell folks about that. And then if people want to get involved, anything else you want to say about what's on the horizon?
Look, this is a target-rich environment. If anyone's watching this on a Wednesday night on Zoom and on Facebook, this is perfect for us, because we do a similar thing on Tuesdays called electionary, which is a play on the term lectionary, which is the passages that churches will read on Sundays. So they're biblical reflections for this election.
Oh, that's got a ring to it too.
A Shane Claiborneism. Biblical reflections for this election. And we put music with it. It's an hour long. You can find it at votecommongood.com and Vote Common Good's Facebook page. It's really fun. So we do that on Tuesdays. On Mondays, we have a cooking show. I don't even know if you know this, Shane, but we launched a cooking show 2 weeks ago, and it's called American Love, and it focuses on the swing states and talks about the food from those states. And so it's a Monday live cooking show, and then on Thursday, a discussion of that food. We do a podcast on Wednesdays. On Fridays, we have a thing called Pray for the President, where we put together a 7-part prayer, one for each day, for how you can pray for the president. They're launched on Fridays. And so if you want to know how you can pray for this president, and look, people who know their Bible well know that prayer doesn't always mean pat on the back and give someone an attaboy and keep going. Very often, prayer for leaders is to call them to change, to protect that which they're not taking care of. And Donald Trump gives us plenty of opportunities to pray for the president, I can assure you. And then we also do a thing called Love in Politics, which maybe we'll talk about right at the end. But we think that politics should be an act of love. Politics shouldn't be a contact sport. Politics shouldn't be a blood sport. Politics should be driven by love for one another, for this country, for the planet, and for all living creatures. So we want our call to politics to be what we call as a love in politics pledge. So that's lots of stuff that we have going on, and you know, all kinds of things, and we're going to also do some things around Milwaukee when the convention comes out, and we're going to do some things in North Carolina
we're teaming
when the
up.
Republican conventions come, whether they're online or in person. We're going to be there. We might be touring the country again if it seems safe to do. We don't know. We just kind of hope that it is, both because we hope the virus has settled down and we hope that we can get out. So there's just a lot of ways to engage. We have groups in different states: Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Florida, called Michigan Christians Stopping Trump's Re-Election. So if you want into that world, we have groups that you can join in for all that, and work you can do, and phone calls you can make, and all kinds of conspiring and vote common do-gooderisms that we have going on that you can be involved in.
Yeah, and we, like Doug said, I don't know if you picked up on that, but we're going to be doing some beautiful stuff around the two political conventions. Red Letter Christians will be, and we're going to be collaborating with Vote Common Good and other folks that in Milwaukee to pull off something that's centered around Jesus, and thinking about what does it mean to love, to vote for love right now, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to form policies out of fear, not out of love, not out of fear. And then we'll be doing a Red Letter revival down in Charlotte as well. So you can stay on our social media and on our website, and we'll have more information about all that. We like Jesus. We like the red letters. Is there any particular passage? This is not always my favorite question when I'm on these interviews, but like, is there, because there's different days, there's different things, but is there something that like keeps jumping back at you from the Gospels these days?
Yeah, depart from me, I never knew you. That's that's the great one.
Get behind me, Satan.
Behind me, Satan. I think Jesus is, for me, it's turned into I just wrote a book about this, by the way. I'm thinking about all this, and the book I wrote is called Outdoing Jesus. And it's
I got it right here on my shelf. Jesus'
big call, and it's from the book of John, that the 7 miraculous signs and the 7 signs in the Gospel of John are a call for us to participate. Jesus' phrase, "Those who believe in me will do the works I'm doing and do even greater works than these." Like that idea, that invitation from Jesus to participate in what Jesus was up to in his day, and then to do even greater works. Like, man, that is the call. We're not doing cheap knockoff replicas of Jesus's life in our day. We're called to do the work and then even greater works. And I think that's been part of the ethos of a growing, expansive, inclusive faith, is that there's a sense of greater than that grows through all the teachings of Jesus.
So it's beautiful. I love that whole passage where he says, "You're going to do the same stuff I've been doing. You're going to do. I'm living in you. I'm doing." Yeah. And so we haven't always represented Jesus well, but it's sure an invitation to do that better. Well, we've been giving people really a good teaser here, Lisa, that we were having a special guest. So our special guest, also our co-defendant in the DC-18, going to jail, protesting the death penalty and for alternatives to it. We had that experience together. But Lisa's also a board member of Red Letter Christian. She's a really great friend. And this was a surprise because we've only been planning this thing for like 2 weeks now or something, right, Lisa? And she's going to tell us, you're muted right now, but she's going to tell us about something that's brewing right now that we'll be doing this next week. So welcome, Lisa Sharon Harper.
Thank you so much, Shane. It's like really, really fun to be on with you guys. And I'm really privileged to be here talking with your community. I hope that you guys have been having a great last hour or two. I'm sure that you have. I'll go quick. So basically, we have this thing happening next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 Central, 12 Pacific Time, where we are going to come on live, Facebook Live. And we would like for you to find us on Facebook Live. It'll be broadcast on the Freedom Road page. So just look for freedomroad.us page on Facebook. So not our website, on our Facebook page. And then from there, we'd like to ask everybody and their grandmother to actually host a watch party of it for your followers, for folks who are following you. So what we're doing is we're putting together a public witness that the locus of power in our society, in this COVID crisis, is not on the State House steps, where protesters are currently and have been for the last several weeks gathering and calling for the heads of the people who have declared stay-at-home declarations. And those folks have actually, in many ways, begun to win, so that the vast majority of states across the United States are open for business now, or they are opening for business. I saw a map of the United States today that had almost every state was in green, in some level of green, except for a few. And those few were mostly clustered in the Northeast, because we were like, look, we experienced New York City. There is no way we're going down a second time. Hello? Yeah. And then also California. So interestingly, at the exact same moment when the entire nation is starting to open back up, COVID is actually on the rise in the places that have the most lax regulations, like Georgia and Texas and other places. They're on the rise, y'all, or at the very least plateaued. So if people start coming back out, it will go back up. So we are declaring that the locus of power is not in the State House. The locus of power is in our house,
Boom.
in your house.
So porch power right there.
Hello, somebody. Porch power. Hashtag porch power. That's what I'm talking about. Yes. So we're going to have 50 leaders from all 50 states that come on for public active witness, where we will show the state houses from our different states, and then that will be our profile picture here on Zoom. And then we will transition, one by one, showing our video, which will be us on our own front porch or
good.
front stoop.
Great video.
So
beautiful.
I'm so glad to be teaming up on that. I got my front porch ready. I even have 3 neighbors that are going to come out on their front porches and join us here. So you'll be hearing a whole lot more about that this week. Follow our social media. Follow Lisa. Most of y'all probably already do, but Freedom Road and Lisa Sharon Harper.
Let me say one more thing, Shane, that I think is important, is that we're not just doing this act of witness. We're also going to have a national town hall conversation. And so we're going to be engaging some of those 50 leaders from across the 50 states in a conversation about how can the church be its most effective self right now in this COVID crisis? How can we engage? What is faithful witness, faithful work, faithful living in the world today look like for the church? So join us on Facebook. So to join that conversation, and you can always communicate with us as well through the comment section on those shares. We will be looking for those.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for taking a few minutes. We'll have you back on here. We're going to keep doing these midweek mobilizing, but we team up all the time. We're grateful for you. Thanks for taking a few minutes to join us.
Appreciate it. No problem. Yeah, Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So, you'll be hearing more about that. And I mean, we just as folks are still kind of gathering from the murder or the new video that showed the murder of Ahmaud Arbery 2 months ago. We now, have this information that in Kentucky, another sister, Breonna Taylor, was murdered by police that raided her house and looking for someone else that didn't live there, and they shot her as she was trying to sleep. She was a nurse. So we are going to keep talking about this. There's an epidemic of violence and racism that's underneath this pandemic that's been going on way too long. And my last question for you, bro, before we pray us out, is I think we have to be very intentional about cultivating our souls and our spirits, but also protecting our hope and our joy. And you and I have a lot of fun together, but we're also we've visited guys on death row. We've been, we've been leaning into the pain a little bit. And so how do you kind of keep that joy and hope alive?
Yeah, I mean, I know how I do it, right? And I think each person has to craft that together. And I think it's one of the great personal skills someone has to develop is how do they curate hope and joy? And I really think it's more of a personal qualities that each of us have to figure out how we do that and how we
It's
do
not a
that.
prescription. Yeah.
Yeah, and like there's just some things you can that you ought to outsource, right? At least someone like me, like I don't know. There's lots of things I don't know anything about. I should ask someone else how to do it and borrow their version. And there's some things that should be yours. And I think how you cultivate your sense of joy, your sense of hope, and to keep that as a personal project that you are going to be committed to working on. I think that's sort of the biggest thing. The people who I know have kept their sort of themselves alive, whether they've been in very difficult physical situations or emotional situations or life. When you talk to them about how they did it, they took it seriously, right? They said taking care of myself and being sure that I pursued some kind of joy and happiness and hope is because I worked toward that and I got to know myself and what it is that causes me to fall into my patterns and to extend beyond my patterns. And so I think that's the biggest part of it. I'll tell you, I mean, like I've had to figure this out here at home because my temperament is not suited for stay-at-home orders. It is not suited for, I mean, it is just the worst set of conditions by which I would have to operate over an 8-week period of time that, I've known, and what you call sort of normal life and normal times. So I have to figure out, how do I do this in this time and in this moment? And a lot of my old tricks, the things I've been working on, they don't work right now. They're unavailable to me. And I'm having to kind of remake that and develop some kind of a sense of connection, joy. So for me, it feels a little bit like, well, this is one of those moments where I have to work on that and have to take it just as seriously as I have at other times in my life, because it's not going to just happen. It's not going to come without some effort.
It's solid. It's solid. I don't know if you saw, but today we posted we've been posting these play and pray videos. So I did some plate spinning, although my wife is a much better plate spinner. But we've been trying to like dust off the circus arts because, it's a little circus in the pandemic is good for everybody. So we had a saxophone player as we distributed food last week that was playing some smooth jazz. So I think we've all got to find ways to, find some light in the darkness.
Yeah,
so hopefully, you kind of hear that here, at Red Letter, and it's certainly been a part of Vote Common Good. You have so many creative folks that have been a part of it. So join every Tuesday night with Doug and I and so many others that'll be on those. And hopefully we can get that big orange bus back on the road again sometime soon. But it'd
be great. And if we do, we'd love to take anybody with us who wants to go.
I've got my I've got the one thing I love. You got faith, hope, and love above your head. You've got this thing that's just solid bookmarks that I've got. And I think, is that how you want to send us out, man?
Sure. Yeah, I've got it on my phone. If people don't have a bookmark already, because you haven't come to one of our events, this comes in bookmark form. $1,000 contribution, we send you a bookmark. Really great deal.
It's better than that stuff they were selling, the silver formula, or just a bookmark.
Better than bleach. It's better than drinking bleach, we like to say. $1,000. We'll cover postage for a $1,000 donation. We'll send you that in an envelope.
In a prayer cloth.
It's also on the Vote Common Good site. So you don't even have to make the contribution. You can just have it for free if you go to Vote Common Good. It's our Love in Politics pledge. So same thing that's on the card. I'll read a bit of it here. It says the Love in Politics pledge calls faithful voters to support candidates who pledge to comport themselves in their public and political lives in a way consistent with love, from 1 Corinthians 13. Therefore, we make these 4 commitments. Number 1, I will call on all elected leaders to comport themselves in ways consistent with love in their public and personal lives. Number 2, I will support elected leaders who do so with my words and with my actions, no matter what party they're from. Number 3, I will stand up to and call for a change from any elected leader who violates the virtues of love, no matter what party they're from. And 4, I will call on all elected officials to demand that other public officials comport themselves in a way consistent with love. No more of this, well, I wouldn't tweet it that way. Stand up for love if you're going to be a leader. And then we list 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, which people often hear at weddings, but it was not intended as wedding only material. It was, how do we then live with each other? And it's really great. Love is patient. And this is the benediction part. Love is patient. And love is kind. Love does not envy, and love does not boast. Love is not proud. Love does not dishonor others. Love is not self-seeking. Love is not easily angered. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres.
Hallelujah.
So may we be people of faith, hope, and love.
Yes. Hallelujah. That little Doug Pagitt this evening at Midweek Mobilizing. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Now, listen, we're doing this for free. And Doug's a really great, give us money kind of guy too. So I want to do the same thing, which is say we're going to continue to offer things for free as much as we can. But if you have the resources, please go to Red Letter Christians, hit the donate button, give what you can. And even if you give $5 or $10 a month, we'll be in regular contact. We'll send you little wake ups and weekly recaps and beautiful articles and sermons and stuff that are out there. And I'm excited to say tonight, we didn't know how long these would go. This midweek mobilizing is something we're doing during the pandemic, but most of us are going to be on stay-at-home orders for another month. So we are excited to announce at least 5 more of these. So we're going to have Jen Butler from Faith and Public Life, Ben Cohen, founder of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream, Jackie Lewis from Middle Church, Dominique Gilliard, and Michael McBride from Live Free. They're going to be our lineup. So we're going to have a great few more Wednesdays. Spread the word. Thank you, my friend and my brother.
After hearing that list, I'm glad I got in early.
And the guest tonight. Hats off to you. Thanks for joining, everybody.
I can get it.
Boom. Yeah, that's it.
It's for you, Katie.
I got to practice that.
You can nail that.
Thanks, dude.
Peace out.
That was great. Good time.